close together. And I want you to move them real slow back and forth. And do you feel a warmth in the palms of your hand? If you do, raise your hand. Let's just see. Okay, good, good. I'll use that in the presentation at the end. At this time, I have about a 3-minute DVD that I would like you to watch. This is my son Andrew from the time that he was a baby, and it just kind of gives a little bit of a history, and you can see how he changed. I want you to watch his eyes. Just before I start, I should introduce you. My wife is sitting here in the front row, Andrew's mom. When I was here 5 years ago, she wasn't with me, so it was nice that she was able to come this time. Young people in every community across the United States are making a lot of choices. Some are making choices that will affect them for life. Some are making choices that are going to shatter their dreams. Some are going to make choices that will cause pain beyond anything that you could ever imagine. Choices that can cause permanent health problems. Some are going to make the choices that are going to make them lie, make them steal, and be put in jail. Choices that could be the death sentence. Drugs and alcohol. I'm here today because my son made bad choices. It started by making the choice to try drugs. Andrew's choice was a death sentence. I've been in the car business for most of the last 50 years, and I've had a lot of employees over the years that had problems of all kinds: alcohol, depression, divorce. One was suicidal. And we with them by getting them help and supporting them and their families during these rough times. Kathy and I always said, we sure are glad that we don't have those problems in our family. It didn't pertain to us, or so we thought. Drugs have changed our life forever. All across America, bullying, drugs, alcohol, now prescription and synthetic drugs are at a level I would call a major crisis. In our little community, we live in a community in northern Minnesota of only 800 people. The two towns next to us are Bacchus and Pequot Lakes, and between the three of us, I suppose maybe we have a total of maybe 3,000. When I was here before, I don't remember exactly how many, but it was in the teens. We now have 26 young people that have died because of drugs, alcohol, or suicide over the last several years. And that is only the ones that we know for sure. There was a young fellow high on drugs that killed a star football player from our neighboring school in a car accident. He was charged and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. A teacher from our school, her daughter went to a party where they were driving and she lost control. She went in the ditch and obviously killed her best friend. She was charged, spent time locked up, and is on probation, I think, for 16 more years. She wanted to be a teacher just like her mom and dad. Those days now won't be possible. We had a 15-year-old girl that went to a party, got into an argument with a boy, and the boy stabbed her to death. They had been using drugs. I'm seeing an increase in the number of kids who are in trouble and needing help. The trouble may be someone in the family who has an addiction and they are feeling that pain. Or they may have a friend who is using, or they themselves are using. 13 years ago, my wife and I were just a normal couple, going to school functions, involved in our community, and involved in the activities that our kids were involved in. Our life was about to change. At first, it was subtle. We had raised our 4 kids, and they were out of school. 3 were married, and the 4th was about to be married. Our youngest, Andrew, was going into the 8th grade. We had never had any problems with any of our other kids, and none of our friends had any problems with theirs. I have come here today to share Andrew's story with you. Andrew was a young boy with self-esteem. He was happy. He always had a smile on his face. His smile was infectious. His eyes twinkled. He had a laugh that you couldn't forget. Andrew had a future. His future seemed to be on track to whatever he wanted to do. He had goals. He talked about the future, going to college, someday getting married, having a good job. Andrew had dreams of traveling to Europe. Andrew was a very good traveler as a youngster. What is happening to him? We wondered. We watched helplessly. He's destroying himself. The harder that we tried to help him, the worse it got. He just wouldn't listen. Andrew would sit and cry because he felt helpless and all alone. The friends that he once had, where were they? Oh, they were there, but he had shut them out. Andrew's self-esteem was gone. Andrew was a good person, but he made very bad choices. 7 years ago, Kathy and I had to face the tragedy of losing our son, Andrew. He overdosed on heroin. The mixing of drugs such as heroin, pills, alcohol is the most common cause of death by overdose. Drugs taken together can interact in ways that increase their effects. With depressants, drugs that slow you down, the risk of passing out or stop breathing increases. With stimulants, drugs that speed you up, the risk of seizures and heart attacks increase. All drugs have the potential to be misused, whether they're prescribed by a doctor, purchased over the counter at the local drugstore, or bought illegally on the street. Taken in combination, drugs with alcohol, every drug normally considered safe can cause serious long-term consequences or death. Every one of you here have looked at yourself in a mirror. What do you see? You see a reflection of yourself. Well, in telling Andrew's story, the reflections are going to be of some good and of some bad in his life. As you listen, does any of his story seem to be a reflection of what might be going on in your life? Maybe someone in your family or your friends? Maybe someone here today might be feeling sad or feeling all alone. You're hurting inside. You feel depressed? Maybe you're feeling like you're not as good as some of your friends. Do you lack self-esteem? Do you know someone who is bullied, made fun of, called, teased? Everyone here knows someone who's drinking or using drugs. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a brother, a sister, a parent, or maybe you are. All the things that I have mentioned changed our lives forever. I have brought Andrew's empty shoes, and I want you to imagine putting those shoes on, and we will walk through the last 6 years of his life. Andrew died on September 18th, 2006. He was 2 months, almost to the day, short of his 20th birthday. When I tell Andrew's story, I wish that I could be reflecting on Andrew's life before drugs, but I can't. You see, the last 6 years of his life would best be described as living in hell. The demons of drugs, alcohol, and depression. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. We will begin our journey in the 8th grade. And like I had said earlier, my wife and I we were very naive to drugs. I didn't think that we needed to concern ourselves with drug education or the signs of a drug user. That happens to others. Well, drugs have no boundaries. They can affect anyone. It doesn't make a difference who you are, what you do, where you live, or how much money you have. Andrew was a tall boy for his age. He loved basketball. And after basketball, Andrew would bring home friends. They would play pool, listen to music, have pizza, and just hang out. Which we liked because these were good kids, and we knew where they were at. One day, Andrew brought home just one boy. And he brought him home so that he could take a shower. You see, this boy didn't have running water in his home. And the kids were making fun of him because he smelled. And when Andrew went back to basketball practice that day, a couple of the boys started making fun of him for being a friend of this boy. Andrew ended up quitting basketball. He was 6'2". And this is when the bullying began. Andrew had a tough time with this because these were his friends. The two boys that did most of the bullying had gone on trips with us. The boy that did most of it had gone with us over to Wisconsin, to Wisconsin Dells, on a week vacation. The other boy went with Kathy, and the boys went to Mexico. And these were, he thought, were his friends, but now they're bullying him. The one boy especially gave him a hard time. Along with the teasing and everything else, and when he hit him in the arms and shoulders, he'd come home with black and blue marks on his arms. And this continued for the next 3 years. I would call Andrew as wounded. Andrew said many times, if I forgive someone, then they'll think it's okay to do it again. Andrew tried to forgive these boys when they bullied him, but they continued. So his anger escalated, and his self-esteem plummeted. Andrew would come home, and he'd be so mad, he was becoming very frustrated and angry. And because he wasn't on the basketball team anymore, he had more free time, and he started making some new friends. We weren't very happy with some of these friends because they were problem kids. Andrew was coming home, becoming more angry and more vocal about this boy who was bullying him. I and another dad, whose boy was also being bullied, we went up to the school and talked with the principal. Things didn't seem to improve. In fact, they got worse. Andrew started changing. How he dressed, it became sloppy. He used foul language. His choice of music was also changing. He didn't show respect to anyone with authority. He was always defensive and argumentative. We thought that we were just dealing with a boy with an anger problem because of bullying. He would come home so upset, he took his fist and punched holes in the walls of our house. He slammed doors so hard that he broke them off. Andrew started talking about that he wanted to go to school and he wanted to hurt this boy who was bullying him. He talked about taking a knife and he wanted to stab him. And he wanted to twist it so this boy would feel the kind of pain that he was going deep and dealing with. We had to get the law enforcement involved and have him taken away from us. He was taken 60 miles to Bemidji, Minnesota, where he was put with boys that were in deep trouble. He was there for a short time, and when he was released, we had to take him to Port down in Brainerd, which is another home for boys that are having problems. And he finished the 8th grade there. Andrew was going to be released in July from Port. And we had a meeting with all the counselors, and they commended Andrew for being such a role model to all these other kids. Everyone was in favor of Andrew's release from Port, except the head counselor. He said, I don't think Andrew should be released. I think Andrew has a drug problem. And that he just didn't want to release him. He felt he needed to be there. We didn't believe him. And the other counselors didn't believe him. So they did agree to release him, but the head counselor wanted Andrew and me to go to a 2-day drug counseling program, and we did. Andrew entered the ninth grade. The bully was still creating problems. One day, Andrew had two of his new friends over at the house. They were in the basement. His brother caught the three of them snorting a white powder. When he told us, we couldn't believe it. These two boys, they were, I would say, the nicer of these new friends that he had. In fact, the one boy was the boy that his dad went with me up to the principal because he was also being bullied. We didn't know what to do. Do we call the law? Do we call their parents? We were devastated. We had a long talk with Andrew, and he said that he promised that he wouldn't do it again. We wanted to believe him so bad. We gave him another chance. And over the next few years, Andrew was given many chances. Over a period of time, we learned that a person that's using drugs, you become a good liar. You're a great actor. You're a master manipulator. They will do whatever it takes to continue their drug use. Andrew's grades now started to fall. Every now and then we would seem to be run out of some of our prescription drugs. So we had to monitor them on a daily basis. Mothers seemed to be missing money for us. Other things started missing. Our golf clubs were gone. When we asked Andrew, he said, I think that maybe one of my new friends took them. He acted mad, and he had us convinced that that was that boy that had taken them. But in fact, he himself had pawned them off to get money for drugs. During this time, everything became unbearable 24/7. Andrew became verbally abusive, disrespectful, and physically aggressive. Mom and I were in denial, and we had become enablers. We were going it alone. None of our family or friends knew what we were living with. At the time, we didn't realize that the constant arguing that we did with Andrew was drug logic. He didn't even understand common logic. So the arguing, the fighting, it zapped every bit of energy out of both Kathy and I. My wife and I didn't always agree on things the same way concerning Andrew, and at times this even created even more tension in our family. When Andrew wasn't on drugs, he was a completely different boy. He was loving, he was compassionate, sincere, and kind. He had a special niece and nephew that he especially loved, and they loved him in return. Andrew's grades now were going down to D's and F's. He was depressed. He started talking about committing suicide. He felt that nobody cared, and his attitude was bad most of the time. In the 10th grade, Andrew got a part-time job at a little restaurant right in our town. He started saving some money, and he was able to buy a guitar and an amplifier. But all of a sudden, his savings was gone. He always locked his room, but one day he forgot to lock it. I went in and was I shocked. He had started growing marijuana plants in his closet. He got a growing light. I found pipes, seeds, lighters, and all kinds of paraphernalia. After destroying everything, we had another long talk. He said that he would stop, and for a period of a couple of weeks, everything seemed good. But then he was back to his old days. Same way. The bully that he'd been dealing with now had even gone on the internet and put out an email not to have anything to do with Andrew. And it wasn't because he was using drugs, because this boy, in fact, this boy's brother died a few months ago because of an overdose. And he used to steal liquor himself. At lunchtime, Andrew would sometimes leave school and come home crying, feeling rejected and inferior. He didn't want to go back to school. In the 11th grade, Andrew got a job at Subway, about 20 miles away. He had his driver's license now, and he liked his job, and he loved the people that he was working with and the people that he worked for. He was part of the team. The principal worked with Andrew that year about the bullying problem in the school, and towards the end of that year, things started to improve. Andrew had a girlfriend. She was one of the nicest girls in our school. She also tried to get him to stop using drugs. The summer between the 11th and the 12th grade, Andrew was on the phone just about daily with his brother, who was married, that lived out in Washington. They were very close. His brother kept trying to get him off of drugs, and he convinced him that he should go back out for basketball. And so that summer, he got back in shape. With a better attitude, he cut down on the amount of drugs he was using, and he went out for basketball. His senior year was his best year. He played basketball and he had fun. He didn't get to start or anything like that, but he did get to play some. He brought his grades back up to A's and B's. Andrew was an A student. He was still using, but not near as bad. During his senior year, he called home one day and he says, "Mom, there's a girl in my class and she needs a safe place to stay." See, Andrew was very compassionate for other kids. He said her mom and her mom's boyfriend were having violent fights and she didn't feel safe. Mom said, "Sure, she can come and stay at our home." Andrew graduated from high school and he got a job at UPS. He was very, very excited about this because he was part of a team. And of course, they do drug tests, he passed. And so he had to stay off of drugs, and he did for a couple months. He started out in the middle of July in hot weather unloading trucks. The hottest job he could ever have. But because he was very smart, a very intelligent young man, they moved him inside into an air-conditioned office and put him in charge of all international shipping. That fall, Andrew even enrolled in our college down in Brainerd. He could still work at UPS and go to school. But early in the fall, I discovered that he was raising marijuana plants again. But now he's got mushrooms, peyote, cactus. I find bunches of prescription bottles, empty packs from the UK, Pakistan, Australia, Mexico, Canada. He was cooking poppy pods and making a form of opium. And when I confronted him, he became very angry. On November 18th, 2005, Andrew called home from work at UPS and said he'd lost his keys. And Mom could detect a slur in his words. She told him that we would come down and get him and drive his car home. We knew that he was high. We drove the 30 miles down to where he worked, and when we got there, his car was gone and he was gone. So we drive back home. At 5:30 a.m. in the morning, we get the call, "Come and get him, he's in jail." When we got there, he was so hot and wild. We had never seen him that bad. The cops had found him on the wrong side of the road. passed out in his car. That bad choice cost him his job at UPS. It cost him his driver's license. And now he started getting fines. So now he had that obstacle to also deal with. Within a few days, things got so bad that the authorities had to come and take him to jail. He threatened to kill me. He wished that I would have another heart attack and die. He wanted to kill me because I had given authorities all the stuff I found. He was released from jail after a couple of days. But a few days later, he threatened me again. This time, he threatened me with customers around at my business. This time, we had to put a string against him, that he couldn't come anywhere near our home. And when the sheriff's office came and served the papers on him, Mom and I didn't even stay in our house that night because we were afraid he'd kill us. He did come home one day, even though he wasn't supposed to. He took his mom's car. The cops saw him. Of course, they knew he didn't have a driver's license and knew that he wasn't to be driving our car. So they took him back to jail. He stayed in over the weekend, and on Monday he got out, and his mother and brother went up and got him. They had given him 2 hours to get the rest of his belongings out of our home. And while he was there, he found a bottle of pills. He took the whole bottle trying to commit suicide. He was taken to the hospital, and after 72 hours, he was let go. He called home. He didn't know what to do. He had no money. He had no job, nowhere to go, or any way to get there. As a parent, it is hard to not help. Tough love is really hard. When a young person like Andrew, when you start using drugs or alcohol, they stop growing and maturing emotionally, and they don't learn coping skills. Although Andrew was 19, he emotionally was thinking like a 13-year-old and having coping skills. He wasn't capable of surviving on his own. We told him that we would come and get him, although he wasn't supposed to come to our home. And we were giving him 2 choices, that he either had to get into a treatment program, or we were going to let the law do it in whatever they wanted. I was calling all over the state of Minnesota at 10:30 at night, trying to find a place for him. And I finally got him in at a place in Wilmer, Minnesota, about 100 and some miles from home. And they would take him the next day. So the next day, his mom took him down to the facilities, got him checked in. But after 5 days, he walked out. He walked 23 miles to a little town called Belgrade. He called late at night, this was in the middle of the night, wanting someone to come. I said that I'll come and get you, Andrew, but I'm taking you back. I took him back, and I got him a motel room for the rest of the night, and I gave him just enough money to get breakfast. But he refused to go back. Finally, after a day, a friend of ours in Minneapolis said, I will go out and get him, and I'll try to get him into rehab someplace in Minneapolis. And after a week, we were able to get him into a facilities, a 45-day program in St. Cloud, Minnesota, 90 miles from home. After 45 days, Andrew was released. And for 10 days, we had our son back. Not the demons of drugs. But he got back with some of his old friends, and he started using again. And I'm going to say this again, and I hope that you young people understand this. When you start using drugs, if you start at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, I don't care where, your brains are not fully developed yet. And you stop growing emotionally. And you don't learn coping skills. I see it over and over again. People in their 30s and they're acting like 15 and 16-year-old kids. They can't deal with things. And that's why they go back to drugs again. Andrew would always say, quit treating me like a little kid. But emotionally, that's where he was. Andrew got another job in Brainerd at what's called Famous Dave. It's a rib restaurant. And I would drive him 30 miles down and get him, come home, go down. But as soon as he got a paycheck, we found more prescription drugs. Now he's buying pills. We find empty bottles. 200 and 400 Oxycontin from all over. I find them in all kinds of hiding places, up under the legs of the pool table, found them up above the registers of the furnace, found them everywhere. We also discovered, I happened to get my credit card statements, and he had put thousands and thousands of dollars on our credit cards. He also took larger items. He took the GPS from my airplane. He took TVs, jewelry from Mom that she didn't use every time. When she went to find it, it was gone. A VCR camera, a small portable TV, a chainsaw. While on break one day at his Famous Days, he called home and asked Mom about a bee sting. He hadn't any more than hung up, and about 5 minutes later, his boss calls and said, hurry to the hospital. Andrew's having a seizure. So we drive the 30 miles down, we get to the hospital, and all that the doctors would say is, we were able to save him. Because he was 19 years old, they wouldn't give us any information. Andrew, when he got out of the hospital, he didn't go back to Famous Days. But he was able to get back working at Subway, 20 miles away. They didn't know that Andrew had a drug problem. On Sunday night, before Andrew died, we picked him up from work. He'd had a real busy day. And he said that he made like 40-some sandwiches in an hour. And he said, I'm the best sandwich artist that they have. That night he came up to go, before he went to bed, he raided the refrigerator. And his mom was talking to our son out in Washington. He said, good night, Mom. She said, good night. She said, do you want to talk to your brother? No, he said, I talked to him on Thursday. About 12:30, I got up to use the bathroom, and I looked out and I could see the light on in our garage. And so as I walked by our stairway, we had 2 stairways going into our basement, one from the garage and one from in the house. And I saw that the light was on, and I said, Andrew. And here he came. He had his blanket, his pillow. I said, would you shut the light off in the garage? Because there was a switch down there. Sure, Dad. I said, good night, Andrew. I didn't realize that that was the last words I'd ever say to him. On Monday, Andrew didn't have to go to work until 4 o'clock. So about 1 o'clock, my wife went down and knocked on the door. And when he didn't wake up, she opened the door and went in, and there he lay dead on the floor. At the visitation, the night before the funeral, when we walked into the funeral home, I saw a man standing up by Andrew's casket. When I walked up to him, I said, I'm sorry, but I don't know you. He looked at me and he said, Mr. Osterloh, I was Andrew's counselor. He started to cry. As he told me, he said, I've never had a young man like Andrew. He said he had so much going for him. He would have accomplished so much in life. He said, Andrew just told me on Thursday that he knew what he wanted to do with his life if he could just lick these drugs. He wanted to go back to school, and he wanted to learn how to work with young people to make sure that they never, ever try drugs of any kind. Amongst all the cards, we had hundreds of cards, there was a piece of paper right here, and I'm going to read it to you. Andrew, I'm so sad that you are gone, and even sadder, I never got to say goodbye. You were always a great friend and someone who I could talk to, that would listen, but cared about what I was saying. I love you and will always remember you. My biggest regret is that we didn't hang out nearly enough after school, and I'm truly sorry about that. May you rest in peace now that you are in a better place. I love you always and forever, Brielle. This was that young girl that he was so concerned about that he called Mom if she wanted to stay. This girl was going to quit high school, her senior year in high school, because she was bullied by the same people. But she did graduate from high school. He encouraged her, even though he was using drugs. He encouraged her not to use drugs. Unfortunately, she didn't. We buried Andrew on a Friday. And on Saturday, I did the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I had a gentleman that I didn't even know that came in and said, that called me and said, I'll run your car business for you while you get your things in order. And he sold a car, and he called and he needed me to come down. And before I went, it was 6 miles from our home. And before I did that, I went out to my son's grave. And I'm going to tell you, it's the hardest thing I ever did in my life. As I stood there crying, I just said, Andrew, what am I supposed to do? I went down and I was doing the paperwork, and as I was talking with these people, all of a sudden they just looked me in the eye. And they said, Jerry, when you're ready, would you please talk to young people and tell Andrew's story? I knew right then and there that's what Andrew wanted me to do. I am to carry on what Andrew wasn't able to do. He is doing more in death than he could have ever done in life. I have had so many things that have happened since Andrew died, and I want to share a couple of them with you. And I know we're limited for time, and so I'm probably going to use a different one, but something that I want you to not forget. Oh, okay. One of the things is that I was with a young man that was going to commit suicide. I'm not going to tell his whole story, but I was with him for over 2.5 hours, listening to him. And when I got all done, I put my arms around him and I hugged him, and I said, I want to leave you with something. And there's one thing that I want to leave with you young people today. In Minnesota, at least, and I don't know what the lifespan is here, but in Minnesota, the lifespan is about 80 years old. And I said, I took out this tape measure with this young man, and I said, you know, I said, take 1 year for every year. And I said, my son, there's how much of my son's life was taken away because of drugs and alcohol. There's how much he got to live right there. This boy was 18 years old at the time. Look at how much he was going to lose. Now I can tell you that that boy is still alive today. We had a family that had a 16-year-old daughter. They couldn't get her convinced to get off of drugs. They did everything possible. They made an appointment with the funeral home one day when she was sober. They took her down to the funeral home and made her pick out her casket. Made her plan her own funeral. What kind of flowers she wanted. What she wanted them to say. I'm going to tell you what, that young lady is alive today. And she's not using drugs anymore. When I was here 5 years ago, there was a young girl sitting in about the 5th or 6th row back, the very first chair. A little dark-haired young lady, she cried during the whole presentation. That young lady came up here on the stage and she hugged me so tight. And she said, "Oh, Mr. Osterloh, how do you handle this pain? How do you take this pain?" And then she whispered in my ear, "My mom died of an overdose." And it goes further than that. There were other kids that came up. There was 3 little girls that came up together and hugged me all together. The one little girl says, "Today's my birthday. A year ago at my birthday party, my best friend died. I can't handle this pain. I don't know how to handle this pain." There was a young boy that came up on the stage that was being bullied. I know you've got bullies in this school. I know that there's kids that are using drugs. I know there's kids that have depression. Please, take this serious. The hurt that my wife and I have and our family has, it doesn't go away. It's harder today to come and tell you this story than it was 5 years ago. Do you know why? Because Andrew's girlfriend, we went to her wedding 2 years ago. Now she's having a baby. His other friends have gotten married and they're having children. We're never going to see any of that. When I got ready to leave this school, and I was in a hurry to get to the airport, when I walked out of the school, that young lady was waiting for me at the stairs. She wanted to talk more. And I said, I'm sorry, but I said, I have to go. I have to get to my plane. She said, "Mr. Osterloh, could I give you a stick of Big Red Gum?" And I took it. When I got on that plane, I cried all the way to Atlanta. When I got there, I called my wife and I said, "Honey, never again am I going to come to a school that you're not going with me." Today, these young people need a mom and a dad. Didn't have to be their own mom and dad. What I want to leave with you today is to tell those people around you that they're important. Stop being a bully if you're a bully. If you know someone that's being a bully, be a friend of that kid. Because that boy or girl, they're hurting. Their self-esteem doesn't need to go away. You will learn as you get older that, hey, saying a compliment to someone, you may save someone's life, because there may be someone sitting here right today, right next to you, that might be contemplating suicide. Because they don't think anybody cares about them. Maybe things aren't very good at home. Believe me, the nicest thing you can do is to be friends with everybody. I don't care, they're different than you are. Maybe they don't have any money. Maybe they don't have as nice of clothes. Don't drive as nice of cars. But believe me, they're a human being. And they have as much right as anybody else to be complimented and to care about them. You don't have to love them, but you can care about them. I called a man that was going to commit suicide. Or I had a man that called me, I should say, here about 3 weeks ago. He was on the phone for almost 2.5 hours. And then 2 days later, he came down to where I work and spent a whole morning with me. All I had to do is listen. That's all I had to do. Drugs took Andrew's money. Drugs took Andrew's self-esteem. Drugs made him lie and steal. Drugs separated him from his family. Drugs ruined every holiday that we had. Drugs robbed him of his dreams. Drugs killed my son. I'm asking each of you that if you know someone is having problems with drugs, be a friend to them, help them. If someone's depressed, listen. Help them get help today. I don't even want you to wait until tomorrow. You go see a counselor, talk to one of your teachers, someone. Help today, because if they're dead tomorrow, it could be your best friend. We don't want that to happen. If you're a bully, again, stop it. And if you know someone that's being bullied, be a friend. I want each of you to look in a mirror often and ask 2 questions. Do I like that person that I see? And am I becoming the person I want to be? And if you say no, maybe you get up in the morning and you don't feel quite right. I had you do this earlier. If you do it right now, you could probably feel that warmth more than you could when you came in here. But I want you to do this. I do this every day. When I get up in the morning, I feel something. Sometimes it's really close, sometimes it's far. You here, feel it. I can feel it clear out here. I still feel it. What I want you to do is to go to your closet. If you can't feel this, and anyway, go to your closet and I want you to find your brightest shirt. Mine is yellow today. A bright shirt, a bright blouse, a bright dress. Put it on. It will change your whole day. I wanted to share Andrew's story with you because we don't want there to be a family in this community that only have empty shoes. You see, my wife and I, the only thing that we have are memories and Andrew's empty shoes. Thank you.